I'd like to call this, call this meeting to order. This is Prescott City Council study session. Today's Tuesday, April 10th, 2018. Let's do a roll call, please.
Mayor Mangarelli?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Orr is excused. Councilman Blair?
Yes.
Councilman Good?
Here.
Councilman Lamerson?
Here.
Councilwoman Scholl? Here. Councilman Sischka?
Last but not least, yes, I am here.
All right, thank you. We have two items on study session today. If you'd like to comment, there are cards. Is that right, Maureen? Comment cards are out?
Yes, Mayor,
Yeah.
there are cards back there.
Okay, so please grab one of those, fill it out, and get it up to the clerk, and we'll get to that after we hear the presentation. So let's start with item 3A.
Implementation and review of the TMDL action plan.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Matt Colleen. I'm the Environmental Coordinator out of our Public Works Department. And today I'll be co-presenting with Rebecca Sidnor of AMEC Foster Wheeler Environment and Infrastructure, and as well as Ben Burns, our project manager for this. To provide a brief background, this entire course of action is based upon the two TMDLs that ADEQ finalized in 2015. Subsequently, in the last year, the EPA has approved both of those TMDLs. Council approved City Professional Service Agreement number 2015-184 on October 13th of 2015. And an overview of the Water Quality and TMDL Regulatory Compliance Action Plan, otherwise known as the Action Plan, was presented to Council on April 19th in 2016. Excuse me. Certainly.
Could you define for the public what a TMDL is?
Certainly. TMDL is a document, a total maximum daily load document. What that does is, in the case of the creeks that we have here, the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality goes through, collects data over a series of time, and then allocates or acknowledges what pollutants are in place and who is responsible for making reductions in those pollutants. So it's both identifying the problem and assigning responsibility for who needs to be taking action to clean up the pollutants of those particular waters.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry for interrupting.
No, good point. So we created an 8-step plan subsequent to that April 2016 meeting. Tasks 1, 2, and 3 have been completed. Tasks 4 and 5 were authorized on August 9th of 2016. And what we're doing here today is providing an update of where we're at, what we've completed to date, and also what the next steps will be in finalizing this overall project. To give us a geographic kind of sense of scale and time to some degree, the map we have up right now, we have 4 creeks. So that would be Granite, Manzanita, Butte, and Miller identified in red. Those were all the initial impairments that were identified by Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, as well as Watson Lake. Subsequent to those listings, an additional 8 creeks were identified as impaired. And so the scale of it has effectively tripled just over the last couple of years. Now, to provide kind of an overview of where we're at in these associated steps, Rebecca Sidnor will provide that update.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
When it was referenced, the scale has almost tripled in the last number of years. When we say that, are they the same particulates, or are they different particulates, or a combination of? Are there different pollutants being introduced today than were being introduced 10 years ago?
No, if I may. To answer your question, what Matt's referring to for this scale is the number of creeks within the watershed that are included. So the, wasn't planning on using. Sorry, thank you. So the There we go. Sorry. Can you see the mouse on the screen there? So, for example, all these creeks that are shown in red currently were the ones that were impaired at the time when we started. What's been expanded is the inclusion of these additional creeks, all within the watershed, but they're all for the same parameter, which is E. coli within the watershed. It's not adding any additional pollutants.
Thank you.
So the, excuse me. So the action plan that Matt had referred to earlier applies to both of the TMDLs, one for Watson Lake and one for the watershed. For simplicity, they're shown in the same graphic here. So on the left side of your screen is the Watson Lake Reservoir TMDL, and on the right side is the Granite Creek TMDL. The way that this project has been completed to date, there are a number of activities that feed into each other across both TMDL work efforts, and so that's why they're presented in one visual on here. So where we're at currently is tasks 4 and 5. Task 4 pertains to the lake reservoir, and then task 5 pertains to the watershed. Both of these tasks are complete. I'll be providing a brief update with what those activities consisted of. Where we need to still go to complete the watershed, to complete the TMDL action plan, is the Watson Lake Reservoir model, which is task 6, the watershed pollutant reduction plan, which is task 7, and then ultimately the Watson Lake Reservoir management plan. Both the pollutant reduction plan on the watershed and the reservoir management plan are the ultimate tasks associated with this work plan that will ultimately result in actionable work efforts and projects the city can implement to achieve ultimate compliance with the TMDLs. So as an update for the Watson Lake Reservoir Water Quality Monitoring Plan, what this task consisted of was selecting a model to use, collecting data on the lake to build upon the existing data that's been collected. What this was 12 months of data collection at 5 locations and at 2 different depths for a range of parameters. The results from the monitoring were provided in a number of quarterly updates and then ultimately in a 4th quarter summary report that was provided to the city. These are just a couple of images associated with this work effort, not to commit anything to memory here, but really just to show general trends as far as what the data has looked like. The figure in the upper right is total nitrogen readings over the complete 12-month cycle, and at each of the 5 locations. And really what we're trying to do here is demonstrate a trend over seasonal variation. It has its low point. Total nitrogen has its lowest point in May and its highest point in January, which is an interesting observation. Also, the other graph shown on here is oxygen with depth. So we can see these are 2 impairments for which the TMDL applies, one for total nitrogen, one for dissolved oxygen. So you can see the very quick absence of oxygen, available oxygen, as you increase your depth within the lake. So again, just trying to show general trends here with what data will be incorporated into the model. The next steps as far as the action plan process would be task 6, which is developing the model that will then be used to simulate different activities and actions the city can implement to achieve the reduction of targeted pollutants, and then ultimately the deliverable of the lake management plan. Task 5 is the other task that has recently been, as we're just wrapping it up right now. What this was is developing a hydraulic model that incorporates water quality parameters. And what this does is it's used to simulate the watershed. So how the watershed, how the city and the drainage basin responds during different rain events. And the purpose for this is to then simulate different activities the city can take or activities to perform, which will then result in a decrease in the target pollutants, both for the watershed as well as the lake, since ultimately the watershed discharges into Watson Lake. As part of this task, what we did was perform a number of samples of street dirt collection at various locations within the city, so that way we can have a more targeted approach, an informed approach for where to implement certain activities in order to achieve the greatest pollutant reductions. We built in E. coli and nutrients within the watershed model. It's a fairly unique model in that it creates both water quality and hydraulic response. 2 memos were provided to the city that summarized our activities to date. Those are approximately 90% complete. We're just in the final process of wrapping things up on those memos. Just a small graphic here to give a little bit of context what a model looks like. It's far less exciting than you would think. It's the graphic there on the left-hand side. It's a number of data inputs at various locations. The image on the right is a series of reach lengths or flow paths within each drainage basin that constitutes the entire watershed. The follow-on task associated with task 5 is task 7, which is to analyze various approaches and to ultimately make recommendations on targeted activities to reduce pollutant loading. So with that, that's a quick summary of what's been completed to date. As far as where we're going from here and what will be before you is task 6, which is the next task for the Watson Lake Reservoir TMDL compliance action plan. What this will do is build on the existing work that's been performed to date. It will also incorporate the data that was collected over the last 12 months as part of the lake monitoring activities. And we will be developing a hydrodynamic model which simulates seasonal variation and also fluctuation in depth with how the lake changes from a chemistry standpoint over time. Task 7, which falls under the watershed, is to build on the work that's been performed so far. The model was developed, and now we are going to complete some minor updates as far as GIS data. The city has been undertaking a fairly aggressive program to update the GIS data, and we need to make a few revisions to our model to reflect those additional changes. So that'll be the first task as far as this item here. Additionally, we're going to perform some genetic marker testing on E. coli. Part of the data that was built into that was used to justify the TMDL was the fact that approximately 90% of E. coli within the samples that were previously collected reflected human markers for human genetic markers. I know the city has undertaken a terrific program in order to line a number of segments of the sewer system. And so it would be good in order to compare kind of pre and post data as far as what the reductions may be in pollutant loading from human sources of E. coli. Also, we can use this in order to identify what other animals or species are contributing to the E. coli loading. And that will be very informative as far as identifying what activities can be performed in order to reduce that targeted pollutant. Additionally, we'll be evaluating certain regional facilities that the city has either already constructed or is currently in the works. These would be regional water quality control features, large settling basins, for example, or something that improves water quality. Also evaluating street sweeping operations as far as the types of equipment and frequencies that are being used. And also identifying LID or low impact development approaches. So things that can be activities that can be done or projects that can be performed in order to improve water quality, with a specific eye on the targeted pollutants, both within the watershed for the watershed TMDL, and then also ultimately what may impact Watson Lake for the lake TMDL. So it is a dual approach there. And then also a combination of actions both for the regional facilities, street sweeping activities, and LID approaches. Ultimately, the results of this evaluation will be built into a watershed pollutant reduction plan, which will outline specific activities, projects, or controls that the city can then implement in order to achieve the targeted reductions in the pollutant loading. So shifting gears back to the Watson Lake TMDL. So data has been collected, models have been developed, and now we are getting to the ultimate point of this project for this task, which is to evaluate different alternatives as far as what improvements can be made with the lake in order to achieve pollutant reductions, whether that's implementing aeration, mechanical weed control, alum application. There's a wide range of potential approaches. What we want to do, similar to the watershed, is just identify what approach and potential projects would result in the greatest pollutant reduction for the cost of the activity or project. So it's to make the smartest, most informed choice that will result in best compliance with the TMDL. The ultimate action as far as this task would be to develop and deliver the lake management plan, which would summarize the activities that were performed to date, summarize the specific activities, including costs for both the watershed and the lake. Cost analysis would be included, that the city could then implement to achieve reductions. So it's a number of steps here. It's a kind of evolving process. Activities are going to be best performed together to achieve the greatest efficiency, since a number of the activities in the watershed would likely have an impact on what happens in the lake for nutrients and dissolved oxygen. So as a quick summary for what we're proposing, what's been completed and what's proposed, this would just be the final steps of implementing the action plan. I know it's been kind of a long time evolving project, but this is the last step for what's needed to provide those actionable recommendations. The deliverables associated with this project would be the 2 plans, one for the watershed and one for the lake, as well as the actual models themselves for the city to, if they choose, to make updates or revisions to over time. The cost for tasks 6 through 8, which are the proposed tasks, including the contingency, is $344,976. And the schedule, we would be able to complete the project within 12 months. And with that, I'd like to open up for any questions either Matt or I may be able to address.
Thank you. Questions, comments from the council? Steve? Yeah.
I keep going back to the high nitrogen levels in January, and that surprised you. And it surprises me too. Can you give me any idea why that might be?
I'd like to start by saying I'm not a limnologist. We do have one as part of the project team who can provide far more informed opinion than I, but my observation and my understanding of the data was that nitrogen levels are associated with the decaying organic matter. And so there's a lot of vegetation here in Prescott, and so as leaves fall off of trees, get washed down into the watershed and into creeks, and then receiving waters, they break down, impacts the lake from a water quality perspective. That's one idea as far as why that might be. But again, actual evaluation of the data would be summarized along with recommendations for improvement for those parameters in the lake management plan.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Blair.
Yeah, I don't know where to start. This has been a long time coming. Maybe with you, Mr. Lamar, we've talked about, or Steve Oros, we've talked about some of the reasons why those reservoirs were bought in the first place, and the major reason was storage. And at some point in time, have we deleted the fact that we're not going to do any dredging of these lakes? Has that been made internally? Because what we're going to do is create a whole different atmosphere out there when we start disturbing the bottom of those lakes. But the question becomes, when we're spending this much money, shouldn't we go to the bottom where we should start and work up, meaning removing all the stuff that created the problem in the first place, holding those folks based upon the coring that we've done, the folks that were responsible for helping pollute these lakes, Southwest Forest Industries, and my list would go on. And then have a plan that says into the future, the city is going to replace all the sewer lines in the creeks or line them. We're going to put in catchment basins, silt catchment basins on each creek prior to the lake. We're going to do X, Y, and Z that keeps those lakes, aerify them, that keeps those lakes not only clean water, but recreational water as well. So just to take this amount of money and not seemingly fix the overall problem, I have a problem with that. So I want to know about dredging. Have we gone past the idea that we're going to do that?
That would be a potential action as part of the consideration in the lake management plan. And so along with that, there was a cost-benefit analysis. And so while that may be a very comprehensive and extensive one, in addition to a very significant cost associated with it, you'd also have Department of Water Resources concerns that we'd have to measure out and work with as well. And we fully intend to cooperate with a number of different folks within the city, water resources, recreation services, so that we can find things that are mutually beneficial across all boards. And so to just go exclusively with dredging, as opposed to weed harvesting, which could help with things like boater and swimmer safety in the future. Those are options that we would also want to look at and consider from that cost-benefit analysis. So nothing's been removed from the table, but it is a case where these efforts are going to ultimately provide us with a menu of options, not only within an annual cycle, but a long-term cycle to reach these water quality markers that we need to do, and do it from the best cost-benefit analysis as we can. And so I equate it to being a measure twice, cut once type of deal, because the relative cost of these future actions will be more in total than what we're looking at right now.
I know it's a big project, but I would hope that the water containment in those reservoirs is one of the major reasons we bought them in the first place. Mm-hmm. And knowing what the pipeline for the Big Chino is going to cost to come in, it would seem to me that there would be specific actions made to know what the cost would be to bring those back to their natural SRP levels for each one of those reservoirs, and then correct the silting problem, and then also then at the same time correct the problem that we have. In the day, and I don't mean to go on, but in the day of Chino Valley Irrigation District using those reservoirs, they didn't have this problem because they drained them every year. And when you drain them every year, you don't have that problem that we're having now with the algae blooms and everything else, because we just don't get there. So at some point in time, we have to recognize, is it important enough for this community to retain that water at a quality that doesn't hold the citizens harmful to what's in those lakes? So it's a big task, but it's a big amount of money too. And this is only the tip of the iceberg.
Well, and we want to make sure that when we go in and have that discussion and it's brought before you to consider in a voting capacity, that we have all the information possible so that we know that it's going to provide the results at X dollars per year or whatever that case may be. We want to make sure we go into it as informed as possible, because to do otherwise, we could end up coming back and having to revisit additional actions a year or 2 years from now, depending on what water cycles bring and how that lake responds.
I appreciate that, because I don't see us ever getting them cleaned up if we don't correct the problem.
And there's a number of different ways we can do that, and permutations within that. And so this is designed to provide a menu and a timeline to look at these projects, some that we can bite off opportunistically as the city's will allows, and others that we can take in concrete steps early on to improve what's maybe more sizable and appropriate to incorporate into everyday operations or otherwise.
Councilman Lamerson.
Thank you. Matt, early on in your presentation, you talked about assignability and accountability and things like that. This has been going on for a long time. ADEQ, Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. The word Arizona comes to mind. ADWI, our Arizona Department of Water Resources, that comes to mind. A lot of SRP, that comes to mind. The water sitting in those two bodies of water isn't all Prescott's, nor should the accountability financially be all Prescott's to clean those two bodies of water up. Prescott, the residents of Prescott, aren't the only souls on the planet that have contributed to the garbage that's in the bottom of those lakes. That comes from all over the county. All right? Mm-hmm. And I just want to keep our finger on the objective, and that's to work with ADEQ, ADWR, and the various different governmental agencies that are accountable or responsible, not put the sole burden of responsibility on the taxpayers and residents of the city of Prescott.
Yeah, and specifically to address that, one of the things that we built into the next phases, the genetic marker testing, that would potentially give us the opportunity to look at what is coming on from non-city properties. One of the hot spots for E. coli is in the Virginia Street Wash just below Acker Park. Now, I think we all know the javelina, the muleys, and the dog walkers that frequent that spot on a regular basis. Now, is that all going to be human-derived, or are we going to be able to identify different origins of some of that E. coli? So that was one of the reasons we built that in, not only to reflect improvements that the city is making and investing in, both in new sanitary sewer lines as well as the pipelinings that were referenced. So we want to be able to document that as well, because that's an important part of it, is realizing that these costs have benefits associated with them and making sure we're bringing that to ADEQ and our partners' attentions.
Thank you, because you also have the cattle industry, you also have the rodeo. There's a lot of contributors to the situation, and I just don't want to lose focus on that.
No, and understanding where those origins are helps us direct not only our efforts, but partnership efforts as well with the county or other partners. I just met with county representatives yesterday at the Rodeo Biobasin to show what we have there and what it's doing in E. coli reductions. And so those are ongoing discussions that cooperatively we can hopefully have a larger impact in undertaking these pollution reductions.
Thank you, Matt.
E. coli forensics is what that is.
I'm going to leave that one alone,
Yeah.
okay?
Councilman Sischka.
Yeah, I keep hearing the 5,000-pound gorilla in the room brought up, SRP. My question is, and I don't see Leslie out there, but are we storing the maximum amount of water we're allowed to store?
I'm the water quality guy.
Yeah.
Not to dodge it, I don't know.
Okay.
But that was an important consideration as we looked at the proposed test to make sure we had the coordination with Leslie and her office as well as recreation services, because it's a multiple user, multiple need
Sure.
resource.
Well, just as a query, I've often wondered, say we are storing the maximum amount of water we can store with our agreement with SRP. If we dredged the lake, we probably couldn't store any more than what we're storing already. And wouldn't that lower the level of the lake?
Good question, Councilman. Good afternoon, Craig Dotseth. Yes, we are storing the maximum amount of water that we currently can store. By coincidence, in 2017 was the first year that we also have recharged the maximum amount allowed by our agreements and stipulation and order, which was 3,860 acre feet. And yes, there are restrictions in the stipulation and order in regards to dredging and or increasing the original volume of the water bodies, of the reservoirs.
Well, I keep on thinking about the recreational opportunities, but if the level of the lake is lowered an equivalent amount that we dredged, wouldn't that prevent or recreational opportunities?
Well, it would be to reestablish the capacity of the reservoir when it was originally constructed. Because it was originally, maybe like this, if silt is filling in, then that's what can be reestablished by the stipulation and order, but we cannot exceed the original. So, and that study is called a bathymetric survey. So that is a survey of that originally bathtub of how much water it held, and to be able to restore it, but not expand it.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Lamerson.
Thank you. I think Craig hit on my question with regards to our contracts about how much we can store and how much we have to let go down the river. And the quality of the water that goes down the river, here again, that's not the responsibility of us to clean up SRP's water. It's their water to begin with. So you answered the question, we can only keep so much water in each one of those two tubs. And the fact that it's polluted, we didn't do that either. So.
Other questions, comments? Okay, thank you. Is there any public comment on that one?
No, Mayor.
Okay. Do you have the little fancy timers?
I do.
Hey, Mayor,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
when do we see this come back again?
The final 3 phases will be brought to you in 2 weeks at the voting session.
Okay.
I believe that would be the 24th of April.
And if that's passed, then that work will take how long?
The 12 months is the schedule of work is.
So at the conclusion of the project, that would include the deliverable of both of the plans as well as a council presentation.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to item 3B.
Discussion of change for the better, City of Prescott initiative to help the homeless.
Okay, before Mr. Goodman gets started on his presentation, I wanted to say a couple things to kick this off. I've had several comments from citizens regarding not necessarily homelessness, but panhandling in particular, or I've learned it's called flying sign. And, it's one thing to be annoyed with that kind of activity, but some people have also felt intimidated or felt uneasy about being approached by some of these kinds of people around our city. And so that concerned me, of course. So several months ago, we started looking at this, trying to figure out how to mitigate particularly panhandling, but also homelessness. I will say that we have some amazing nonprofits in our city, some of whom are here today, CCJ and US Vets, to name a couple, who have been very helpful in the process. We worked very closely with them to try to figure out why people are flying sign. Because really you need to get to the root of the problem of do they legitimately need to do this kind of activity? And if so, can we come up with services or help so they don't have to fly sign? And so I will tell you, our city is extremely generous. You all know that. We have lots and lots of services that are offered here in our city. You can eat every day a hot meal somewhere. And so that's good for these people. But anyway, we're really trying to come at this with compassion, trying to figure out how do we actually help people? How do we get them reconnected with relationships of people who love them and will help them? And I think you'll see with all of these initiatives that it's not just about cleaning up our streets or our town. It's more about how do we help these people. And so that's kind of how we went at this. And Tyler has done a great job running this initiative, and I appreciate his work. He's done a tremendous job putting this together. So with that, Tyler, why don't you share with us what you've got?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor, and good afternoon, Council. As the Mayor stated, we did a lot of research. We talked to a lot of cities. We looked at a lot of cities. We spoke with the Seattle Union Gospel Mission about their initiatives. We tried to pull in different elements to make this initiative successful. And Change for the Better is the title. It's the City of Prescott initiative to help the homeless. And I want to thank Tracy Horn and Helkin and Horn for helping us with that imagery and the logo. We think it's going to go really far for us. So getting into it, the main overarching element of this is a marketing campaign. And you might be asking, what are we marketing? Well, we're going to be marketing to residents, to citizens, and to visitors that there are legitimate and good means of donating money if they wish. If they want to help the homeless, if they want to help those who are panhandling, there are ways to do it. And it can be through this initiative, or it can be directly to those service providers. We're going to be using all of those outlets, the print and social media, the radio, flyers, posters. We're going to be talking to businesses, the hotels, the Chamber of Commerce, and we already have to some degree. And we're going to be outreaching to all those different service providers and the faith-based community in this to be partners going forward. And as you can see, we've created some posters that are going to be in the businesses and around town. We've also worked on getting these donation boxes, and I'll touch on these a little bit further, but these will ideally be in businesses around town, and it will be a spot for people to say, hey, I really do want to donate. I saw somebody on the street, but I feel more comfortable and I'd rather give through this initiative, knowing that the money will be going to service providers and going to places that for sure will do the most good. I also want to thank Ian Mattingly from Public Works for his help on this portion. Looking at, there's a lot of cities around the nation that are doing this, and it's basically taking old refurbished parking meters, placing signage on them, and the picture you see is just an example. Ours will be different, but just to give you an idea of what it could look like. And with some signage saying, donate your change here, it will go to the sources that can make the most difference. And you can see on the map there, the pink pinpoints are where we're thinking of placing these meters around the downtown square, 4 different locations. And these areas get a lot of foot traffic, a lot of visitors, and can help market this idea and get the word spread that this initiative exists. Signage, this is another thing that a lot of cities are doing, identifying areas that are most trafficked by those who are panhandling, and we've focused on 8 areas to begin. You can see the Fry Shopping Center on Willow Creek, Costco on Walker Road, both Walmarts and the various exits there, Gateway Boulevard at the intersection of the highway there, the main exit from the mall, near the post office on Miller Valley Road, and downtown at the corner of Cortez and Montezuma where the Hotel St. Michael is. Placing signage to encourage people to give through this initiative or to directly to those service providers rather than giving money on the street. And many other communities implement some architectural features that the goal is to deter panhandling from certain areas. And the 2 pictures on the right are pictures that I took here in downtown Prescott, and these are on private property, and you'd probably never even notice them if you just walked by. I never had, and I've lived here most of my life, but they're there. Folks use them, again, as a deterrent. But what the city of Prescott is wanting to start with, the upper left shows a bench, and we have identified about 20 benches near the downtown, city-owned on city property, that we like to place an armrest on. This discourages people from laying down, from using it for other means than what it's intended for, and hopefully that will help. Also, on the bottom left, it looks a little bit dark on the screen, but you can see a little yellow star there. That is the corner of Gurley and Montezuma, and that's a concrete slab. That's city property. It's a manhole cover there for storm drainage. It is infrequently used, from what I'm told, but we get a lot of comments and complaints about this specific intersection. We are looking, after speaking to staff and trying to figure out solutions to especially that corner, we are wanting to place a trash receptacle, and you can see them. They line Whiskey Road. They're already there. They blend in very well. But placing one there as a deterrent to not use that concrete slab, and again, that will also be one of the places for signage, because there's a lot of foot traffic that gets that intersection. And the Coalition for Compassion and Justice, CCJ, and I want to thank Jesse Hans for a lot of hard work on this. I've created a work program called the Works Progress Agency, and I want to thank Joe Baines as well. Him and his crew will be helping with this. The goal of it is to identify those panhandlers, and we've spoken with CCJ and US Fits, Carol Benedict as well, seeking those who are interested in working and provide them with consistent opportunities to work, give them an opportunity to get a hand up. It is envisioned to start with up to 8 employees, 2 different shifts of 4, 2 different crews, doing several hour shifts a few times a week around town. And the city, through Joe Baines, has identified a lot of projects that we can use some help on. It's funded by a $10,000 United Way grant, as well as the city paying up to $9,500 from bed tax for some maintenance, trash collection, and a lot of other different works in progress projects in city right-of-way and on other city properties. And we really think that this is going to be a good way to reach out and to have that compassion side that the mayor mentioned, giving people an opportunity. If they don't want to be panhandling, they have an opportunity to come and earn some money. And finally, the ambassador program. I've put together a request for proposal that upon today's discussion will be sent out to seek downtown security and ambassador services. And the idea is to have 2 ambassadors at a time walk through the downtown. The certain parameters for now, unless you want it to be different, is from the months of May to August, Fridays through Sundays from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. And their goal would be to provide hospitality and information to visitors and even residents if needed. They'd be the eyes and the ears on the street, walking around our downtown every day. They would be able to report crime and other problems, and they can provide information on available services to the homeless and to panhandlers, and be a connection point, a communication point, help them go in the right direction if they're unaware of certain things that are available to them, and just help us be out there on the street. And to wrap up, I want to talk about an informational meeting. We're inviting businesses, local service providers, nonprofits, and the faith-based community to come to an overview of this program. Well, they'll receive some brief information from the Prescott Police Department. They'll receive these donation boxes. They'll get the flyers, the posters, all of that. It will be next Wednesday, April 18th. There's 2 different meetings, one in the morning from 8 to 9, and the other from 4 to 5 in the afternoon. And it'll be right here at City Hall in the council chambers. Prior to that, if you are a business or one of those other folks I mentioned, we want you to go to our website, prescott-az.gov, and sign up to get one of these donation boxes in advance. That way we can get them to you, have a record of it, and keep track of them. Go to the website, click on City Management and Leadership, and you'll see the link there. With that, Mayor, that's all the information I have, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tyler. Questions, comments from the council? Councilman Blair.
Have you identified who is going to be the banker of the boxes?
The city will be the banker for now. That is our solution for now. Some communities have worked with a nonprofit to be the fiduciary in that. But for now, this is the best way that we've been able to roll this out quickly.
It'll be a local grant.
And to distribute the money from the meters and from the boxes, we'll be collecting those, and the idea is to distribute them, or at least collect them quarterly, and maybe distribute them biannually. There will be a grant program where the service providers can sign up, they can apply, and that way we'll know who wants some of this funding.
Councilman Lamerson.
Thank you, Mayor. Bring a box to me.
I will,
Have
absolutely.
one right there on Broad and Main Street, a sign in the front window.
Absolutely, we'll do that.
And I think, Tyler, the the money collected, we found there were some specific needs when we were listening to service providers that maybe aren't covered. And so my assumption is some of this money could be used for those kinds of purposes for people that have needs that aren't met from the service providers currently.
That very well could be. We could work with them specifically to say, what needs can you currently not cover that those who are panhandling are seeking to get covered? Mm-hmm. And if they're appropriate, use it for that.
Right.
It also could help fund the ambassador program.
Yes, the idea is also, depending on the levels of funding that come in, to help support the ambassador program and keeping this initiative going.
Yeah, that's a good aspect. I know there was a lot of council feedback in terms of security and safety on the downtown in a previous meeting, and so I think that'll be helpful for that. Councilwoman Scholl.
Thank you, Tyler. I can tell you put a lot of hard work into this, and I appreciate it. Have we thought about any ways that we're going to measure the success of this program?
That's a good question. It's if you want to look at it financially, I don't know if that's the best way. Some cities do, and depending on the way they approach it, that can vary a lot. I think what our success will be is a big part on the work program. We want people who want an opportunity to work, to get off the street. Again, the mayor touched upon people feeling uncomfortable, even walking to their vehicles. I think we would like to get rid of that if at all possible. I know you can't eliminate those things 100%, but making strides towards that.
Councilman Good?
Well, first of all, I'd like to congratulate you on addressing this issue. I know it's been a concern to many, many residents here in the city, and it's not an easy problem to solve. I know a lot of communities have attempted many different solutions. Some worked, some didn't work. I'm sure you looked at other cities who've tried similar programs. How have they measured their successes? Have they continued these things? Have they refined them? What issues turned out to be the most effective, et cetera?
Yeah, that is a good question. And depending on which element you're talking about, for example, we looked at a lot of cities who do ambassador programs very much geared to what we're trying to do as well. It looked as if they really partnered a lot. If it wasn't the city starting off right away, it was partnering with downtown partnerships, with chambers of commerce and entities like that. And they have kept those going. The parking meters, the donation boxes, there's quite a few who do it with a lot of varied results. I think us being a tourist destination helps a lot. It'll bring in that traffic. But I think a key element, in which is the overarching element, is the marketing, is getting people aware, especially if they're not from here and had never heard of Change for the Better. What is that? Well, if they understand what it is, and if they feel that compassion, they can donate through this initiative. That would be a good measure of success, I think.
And to dovetail on the comments of both Councilwoman Scholl and Councilman Good, I would hope we would see a meaningful reduction in the amount of people panhandling. I mean, I think we all know where it's happening and got a good idea of how many people we're talking about. If, in a 12-month period, we see a lot of those corners aren't experiencing the same kind of panhandling they have, that's a meaningful reduction in my mind.
Well, I think it's a way to support the legitimate people who have real needs, hopefully short-term needs that I know CCJ is committed to try to get people kind of back on their feet, so to speak. So this should support that, but also for those individuals that really are taking advantage of the generosity of both our residents and our visitors. It might be turning off the spigot, so to speak, here. So I imagine we'll be able to tell whether this is working just by our experiences in downtown and near the city core, and it's certainly worth the effort, and I'll keep my fingers crossed. Thank you.
Well, yeah, and I think you're right. There's more of this going on than we realize, where our citizens are being taken advantage of. I went on a little tour with Chief Black and Sergeant Scott, and it was interesting. Great tour, CCJ, by the way. They do a great job over there. But we went to one familiar location where they do a lot of panhandling, and behind the rock where they normally hang out, there was a stack of several signs, you know, and I'm told that it was the sign of the day, you know.
The Monday sign, the Tuesday sign, et cetera.
Yeah. Councilman Sischka.
Thanks, Mayor. Tyler, do you have any idea what the percentage breakdown would be between honest to goodness homeless folks that need a hand up and those who are in the business of panhandling? And it truly is a business.
Tax-free.
Jesse, would you like to?
I don't know if I have a percentage. I can tell you that the folks that I speak with, that I do see panhandling, there's a real need there. There are some people out there, I mean, I drive around purposefully to see who's out, and some of them I don't know. What I would say is that the perceived need might be different between the folks who are staying with us and those folks that we don't know that aren't receiving resources in other ways. So so what we see is that a large portion of the folks have one or both of the following, which is serious mental illness or substance abuse issues. And so what is the need? You know, what we consider a need might be one thing, and the need that we might be seeing is another. So serious mental illness, if we think this is a business, I think that might be the need that we might be seeing.
Okay.
I don't think that people are out there making a fantastic wage on the street. I think that is a misperception. I think that the needs that they're meeting may be different person to person. Okay. I don't know if that hopefully wasn't just clear as mud, but.
Yeah, that was clear as mud. I appreciate that, though.
Thanks.
Councilman, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'll just ask my second question, Tyler. What if you brought one of those, or I picked one of those up here at City Hall, who is responsible for bringing it back full of money?
We are asking at this time for the businesses to be responsible for that. As they sign up for one, they're agreeing to receive it and to distribute the funds back to the city in full as the city directs.
Okay, maybe if I could ask a third question, Mayor. What we're assuming with this program is that the nonprofits that exist today don't have enough money to take care of the people who are out there panhandling. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Councilman Shishka, I think that, you know, if you were to ask any startup not-for-profit, they're always going to tell you they don't have everything they need to take care of the population. But as we alluded to, there are a lot of negative externalities that the city experiences because of this type of behavior.
Yes.
And in order to combat that, things like the ambassador program. So it's not only to distribute the money to the not-for-profits, it's for us to help combat some of the expenses we incur because of the negative impacts of this type of behavior. So.
Okay. No, I totally understand that, Mike, and I appreciate that. My concern is that if someone says, okay, I gave at Olson's when somebody asked them for money, would after a while, would that give them a reason to become somewhat irritated about that situation? And that was a question that just came to my mind. Guys on the corner asking for money, and you say, hey, I gave it this, you know, at a business so that you could be taken care of. And, you know, how much of that would be, well, but I need the money now, or I need the money for, or whatever. You know, I mean, I hopefully we can, you know, alleviate that situation and not exacerbate the situation.
I agree.
Thank you.
Councilman Lamerson.
Yeah, going back to the question about measuring success, I don't think that it's going to be that difficult to understand how many meals are going out and how many people you don't see on the street and how much, you know, sometimes you have to take the bull by the horns and try and fix a problem. And the business community has acknowledged a problem. It's not good for business. It's not good for business to see poverty at any time. It's just not good. So I commend your efforts on trying to come up with a solution. Let's see how well it works. I mean, we got measuring sticks.
That's a good point. I think Tyler and I have been talking all along, and we've asked for open dialogue with service providers and others who are advocates for these people to make sure that, we don't pretend to think we have all the answers and this is the exact fit. To your point, Councilman Good, we're going to have to tweak this plan and it'll evolve, and that's fine, but we're going to start here and kind of see what works, what doesn't, and move from there. So, yes.
That thing is so frustrating. Well, to your point there, Mayor, here again, I think it's not that difficult to measure this. And I really think there's an opportunity for the business community to be the leaders that we like the community to think we are. And sometimes it's about service above self. I will also share with you, being in downtown, because of the extended police presence in downtown, you don't see quite as much issue in the downtown as we had before. So I commend the chief and her soldiers, so to speak, because they have made a difference. And I think here with ambassadors and people working the downtown and the core, or ambassadors out working by Walmart or wherever the case would be where you seem to have an issue, I think that we, the people, can stand up and take care of this without having to come down with some onerous law. I think this is a good thing to try.
Any other questions or comments? Councilman Blair.
I do. From the young lady from CCJ, if I could ask you a question. And I'm usually pretty pointed. For somebody that was born and raised here, and for somebody that seemingly never saw within our community a homeless population, why the influx of all the people that we have here now?
The point in time count actually points to over 80% of our people have lived here more than a year or over 3 years. A lot of them are durably homeless, and a lot of them are from Prescott. 80% of our population in the shelter during the point in time count are between 45 and 65-year-old white males, and predominantly from Prescott. So I would point to a lack of affordable housing, the increase in the cost of housing, as well as not an increase in wage. We also have a large population that is just verging on disability. So those folks that are capable of doing work, but it has to be low labor, low skill work. They're readily available to do work, but some of them, due to mental illness, are not capable of holding even a part-time job. So that's what, through our work programs and through this specific program, we're hoping to employ people and manage people in a way that is a little bit more compassionate, and we can train those people into those part-time and full-time positions, hopefully, at low skill, low labor.
And we've been talking about measuring sticks. What is the measuring stick that you use? You see the people come in, out. Is it the same people there every single day? I mean, what's the turnover ratio? And when there is a turnover ratio, all of a sudden, because I drive around a lot, and I'm in that neighborhood. I have a business in that neighborhood, and I see different people all the time. Where are they coming from?
We have, they do come, our folks do come and go. Some of them are camping part-time, and some, which, we call camping out, but camping illegally. And some of them are with us regularly. So we have two different kinds of shelter. One of them is progressive shelter, so those folks that have shown us that they're moving forward in employment or resources or trying to gain housing, and those people are required to stay sober. And so those folks are in one part of our program. Then there's another part of our program that is more transient, which is our actual emergency shelter. So that is anybody is welcome up to 50 beds a night. We are full every night, but like I said, what we do see, I mean, I'm in the shelter every single day, so I see these folks. It is primarily the same folks consistently. Our point in time count usually points to around 150 to 200 homeless at any given time in Prescott, but we believe that's closer to 300 because a lot of those folks don't get reached.
I'm just curious because we've evolved the compassion part of it way beyond the scope of what I think was intended, because what was intended originally with Mr. Mitchell was the fact that we wanted to have a shelter for people during the wintertime, so they had a place to go that was safe, warm, and able to have those types of things. Now we've evolved to a situation to where we're housing a pile of people when it didn't used to be that way. See, I keep going back the way it used to be, and I have a hard time putting my arms around the number of people that come out of that shelter and go back to that shelter every single day and hang around in front of all the businesses. What are they doing with their lives, and how can we help them be better? And I don't see that happening in a lot of ways.
So what our goal is to have within 6 months of someone being with us that we've created a connection with them, which we talk about reconnecting with families. Some of our people do not have the ability to reconnect with family because family's not open to that. We create that connection and getting to know that person, coming alongside them in moving forward, and it's a requirement to be in that part of our shelter. They have to show how they're moving forward. And so our goal is that within a 6-month span of someone living with us consistently, that they would be ready to move out, that they would be able to sustain some kind of housing, which we have housing at very low rates within CCJ, that we can create a history of our client having a landlord. We're that compassionate landlord, so that we can then put them in housing that might be fair market rate housing through whether they're gaining disability, whether they got a job, or whatever the stable income is that they've gotten. So our goal really is for people to come to us, often very unhealthy, and for us to put them back into the community, into a healthy community, and to be part of that healthy community, so that they are no longer the homeless population, but they are the Prescott population. So, you know, and I think that that's part of what we do is there's that label of homelessness. As soon as someone has a home, they're no longer homeless. They're a part of our healthy population. And so what we're trying to do is reincorporate, and we do that through work training programs, through housing, and through getting people hooked up with all kinds of resources to help them along the way. And it truly is our client's agency that moves them forward, their own agency. We're just coming alongside them and helping them over the barriers, whether that's mental illness, substance abuse, you know, felonies in their background, whatever is holding them back, we try to help them over those barriers.
Thanks for your comments.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Jesse. Councilman Lamerson?
Thank you. Go back to some of the things we've gone over the years. It's not a crime to be poor. It's not a crime to be homeless. I would like to ask the chief, with regards to criminality, is there some sort of an association that you could put your finger on, the crime rates in Prescott connected to homeless?
Mayor, Councilman Lamerson, crime rate, probably not. Calls for service, definitely.
And the calls for service typically are what?
Loitering, laying on the park bench, some kind of a disturbance in the park or a public area. A lot of it is shoplifting.
Well, that's a crime. So
drinking from an open container, things like that.
Okay, thank you. And hopefully your folks are in agreement that something different needs to be done than what we're doing.
We have been in all of these conversations with the mayor, city manager, and Tyler. So we're absolutely behind this 100%. As you noted, the presence of officers in the downtown area has made a difference. They're not rousting people. They're not harassing people. They're connecting with them. They're talking to them, finding out, do they know about the services? Can we help you get there? Would you like to talk to Teros? Do you need to go to CSU? Can we make sure that you're being counted at CCJ so we know more about you and how they can help you connect and get out of homelessness? So yes, public safety is our primary mission, but that safety applies to absolutely everybody.
I think it's probably good for me to say this, and the chief sort of alluded to it. We started with the enforcement element. All of this is supplemental to the relationships and the enforcement element. Doesn't replace it, it's just an add-on to try to get better results than just through enforcement.
Chief, could I ask a question,
I just
Mayor?
wanted to bring that into what Councilman Blair was, because I agree with him. There seems to be an issue. However, I think there's more than one way to try and handle the issue, and I think it's coming forward with maybe a different result.
Understood.
Thanks, Mayor. Sorry, Jim. Chief, when your officers approach these folks, what is the reaction?
The reaction
Well,
from the
you know,
individual,
when
or
you're trying to inform people
usually
of their
it's,
services
"Hi,
and things.
Sergeant Scott," or "Hi, Brandon," or "Hi," they know them well.
Uh-huh.
And, some of it is, "Hey, I'm not doing anything, I'm not bothering anybody." And so there is that understanding of the roles. And we don't, again, we don't harass people, we don't want to rouse people. But if there is a complaint about some behavior, we will respond to that and contact the individual. We are also a resource. As the mayor can attest, the day that we were out just driving around, a gentleman came up and said, "Hey, my wallet was stolen." "Well, why didn't you report that?" "Because I don't want you to know where my camp is," was his response. But then he knew exactly who he believed took it, and then we were able to contact that individual. So, even when something isn't a reported crime, and even when the victim doesn't have an address and doesn't want us really to know where they stay, we're still out there to help.
It's good to know. Thanks, Chief.
I can attest to that. For 3 or 4 hours, we tied up lots of resources because this one guy lost his wallet. He was going to go beat up the guy that he thought took it. So Sergeant Scott's mitigating that. And then we ran into a guy who was on meth or whatever. And so there were a lot of resources thrown at this over the course of 3 or 4 hours for 2 guys, 2 instances, substance abuse, and just a altercation between homeless guys.
And that really gets to the point of building a relationship, because you can mitigate those impacts.
Thanks, Chief. Any other questions or comments? Should we go to public comment?
Lucinda Grant.
And I'll remind you have 3 minutes, if you could please, and we'll have the timer right up here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cindy Grant, Lucinda Grant. I just wanted to say thank you for trying to help the homeless people. I've done some research on these things too. Some people around here, they know more than I do. They say we need a regional housing authority for this area through the county. And maybe Tyler here could do some more research on some of these things that I've thought were important. It includes the need for more shelters in this area. This is a Quad City issue. It's not just a city issue. So the cost of this should also be dispersed regionally. And the multi-unit housing that's low cost, encourage more of the multi-unit low-cost housing. That's what some of the housing people say, we need more of that. There can be serious issues in this area, like a waiting list for rest homes for the seniors. We have the Veterans Hospital, so some of the older people may have serious medical problems and are trying to get housing or stay in housing. There can be a problem with rental assistance. The shelters can be full. The city bus is gone. The soup kitchen is gone downtown. Some people may be arrested overnight because they're outside, and this can be a problem where they have, frostbite, freeze to death. They can have dehydration in the summer, and we don't want the people to have a problem with homelessness outside in these severe conditions of weather. The problem with arresting people overnight, I think it's 10 days for camping or something like that, is what I've heard around. I'm not sure. But is there even a men's shelter in Cottonwood? I don't know. Where do they go? And it's not easy to get back here from Cottonwood either, unless you take the new Greyhound Connect bus. It's getting more difficult to travel because we've even lost the plane service lately. We're everybody's hometown. And ACOG has some rental assistance, they said the other day, and foreclosure help. We need to be careful about fires around here. Fires can lead to homelessness. Camping is limited because there's like a 2-week wait of camping in this forest, and then you have to go to another forest if you do it legally. So you just can't camp everywhere for free. We need to respect the disabled. Some people have poor food choices in this area. I would say the mayor did mention that you can get food every day, maybe free around here, but maybe you need to eat more than 1 meal a day. Are we getting 3 meals a day? The problem is some shelters are day shelters, like Coyote's Garage. Most of these shelters you're talking about are night shelters, and night shelters don't necessarily feed anybody.
Wrap it up, please.
I'm sorry?
If you could wrap it up, that'd be great.
Okay, so we need to work more with the rapid rehousing program through Catholic Charities. I'd like to see more of that. And also Housing First program, that was in Seattle. We need to look more regionally, more large at
Thank you very much.
shelters.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Daniel Mattson.
Good afternoon. My name is Daniel Mattson. I'm a homeless advocate in this area, and I'm sure all of you know I know this topic very well. Her talk about housing authority, there's been a lot of work toward that, and we're hoping that at some point that will get done, but the county doesn't want to do it. We're working on it. Now, when you come with this program that you've got, and you're talking about discouraging people from giving to the panhandlers, I'll give you a couple of the reasons why someone needs to panhandle and why their need has to be filled short term. Many a time someone will be released from the ER, they'll have a prescription, they'll have no ability to fill it. And like say a Saturday afternoon, they might be able to go panhandle and get enough money to fill that prescription, but the service providers aren't even open. So by the time they can get to CCJ or one of these other programs, it's Tuesday. And now they've gone without their medicine for several days. So that person has legitimate reason to want to panhandle. You have people that live in their cars that aren't at CCJ or any other shelter. They have to maintain insurance. They have to have gas in the tank. You have that thing run out of gas on the side of the road, they're going to get it impounded and they'll have nothing. So that person might need to panhandle for some gas. If they need to come up with $50 for their insurance and they've come up with 30, they can go fly a sign for a little while and come up with the 20 bucks to finish paying the insurance. The service providers aren't paying your insurance every month. They might do it 1 or 2 months out of the year. So there are legitimate reasons why someone would need to panhandle and would need to have access to the money short term. Waiting for an appointment a week or two down the road at one of the service providers isn't going to cut it. So you're not going to eliminate the legitimate need to panhandle. Jesse mentioned people with substance abuse problems. A lot of them are people with mental health issues who are self-medicating. There are a lot of people who smoke tobacco. And it's easy for all of us to say, well, they should quit. But the stress involved in quitting, when you're already stressed out because you don't have a home and you don't have proper mental health meds, they're going to get their tobacco. They can either panhandle for a little while and get the money for it, or they can go try to steal it. I'd rather have them panhandle. The service providers are not going to provide tobacco. That's just, I don't know any of them that has that in their allowed services. So, I mean, this issue is much more complicated than I have the time to cover in 3 minutes. Steve mentioned about seeing a lot of new people. I notice that too. I'm a homeless advocate, and I actually take care of some of the things that you use resources on. I give people rides. I help them get services. I go to Salvation Army almost every morning, and we end up with all kinds of new people from who knows where.
If you can wrap it up, Daniel, that'd be great.
Okay. Although this would be a time where you might consider an extra couple minutes.
Thank you.
See ya.
No more speaker cards.
Okay, got one more?
Thank you.
2 more.
Thank you. Ralph Hess.
That'd be me. Good afternoon. I wanted to wait to hear what everybody had to say to see whether I had anything to add, because this is not really an area that I have a lot of experience. And from what I first read this memo, I was saddened at the fact that it appeared to be aimed more at eliminating panhandlers than it did to helping the homeless. There are some aspects in here that are commendable with regard to the work program. But years ago, this council addressed the issue that panhandling is a constitutionally protected speech. And I get the sadness that comes to me is when I see council looking at ways to circumvent, or appears to be circumventing constitutional protections, as with the people who reside in sober homes, and now with the panhandling. Mayor, you talked about compassion, and I'm not as familiar with any of the folks who have addressed you today with regard to the issue facing these panhandlers. But when I see a suggestion that you're going to have signage right at the places where panhandlers find to be most effective for being successful in getting the money they need, that you're going to have signage telling people not to give them money. I haven't been homeless, but I would feel demeaned by putting signage right where I have a legal right to be asking for donations. That would not be something that I would deem to be a compassionate action of this city. And I understand different people have different ideas about what compassion is, but that would be bothersome to me. The other aspect is this defensive architecture where you have people here who we've heard don't have many options. And it's a complex problem. And we're not providing all of the solutions. We're looking for a quick fix on this. And putting armrests on a bench to keep somebody who has no other place to sleep from sleeping doesn't seem to be compassionate to me either. So I recognize that a lot of you are businessmen, the people downtown business, they don't like panhandlers. They don't like to see panhandlers around on the street. We had that conversation when the city was trying to find a way to keep panhandlers out of the downtown area. And when I read this, I'm concerned that with this ambassador program, that's exactly what is going to be attempted to be done, is to get panhandlers to circumvent the constitutional protections that these folks have to be downtown.
So if you could wrap it up, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ralph.
I don't think I have anything more.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Come on up, Connie.
Connie can tell me.
Connie can tell me from Prescott, Arizona. I'm a resident and also a business owner in the downtown area. And I wanted to thank you all for making an attempt to help those of us in the business down here in Prescott, Arizona. I came back to Prescott 15 years ago. What I saw, as you all know, was very disturbing to me, what's happened in the downtown area. I got pretty involved. I found out way more about drug addiction than I ever wanted to find out about, and now again about homelessness. I've got to remind everybody, and I got a crash course in this by buying the former church on the street. To this day, I struggle as a business to keep this problem away from the people that want to come in and use my business, either for a wedding or stay in the house that I own down there. People in this audience have to understand the face of homelessness has changed. These people have become very aggressive, and yes, they do have rights, but they lose their rights when they become aggressive panhandlers. This has got to stop. I had a client stay at my house who was attacked, literally attacked outside the door of my home. This has got to stop. So I thank you for trying to do something. I don't think we need to encourage this. Those people have rights, but we people in business have rights as well. We're trying our very hardest to make a living, to make this town better, coming from where it came from, and we need the help right now, and this is a good start to help. Nothing against the homeless people. I want to help them too, and I give a hell of a lot of money every year to help them. But I'm going to tell you, as a business owner, we have got to understand and make some of these charities accountable for what they're doing. CC&J, that's another one. I went on your website. I looked at your tax returns. You guys, in the last 5 years, and it's not current, by the way, it's 3 years old, you've made $4.2 million. What do you do with that money? You've got 200 participants. I'd like to make an accounting
Connie, address
of that.
the council, please.
I'm so sorry about that, but I've just got to say, it's very aggravating to me. If you look at every single charity we have down here, and I've got a list of 27 of them, and then you go to complain, like one of the guys I had at Salvation Army that was being fed there every day, he's the one that accosted my customer. I went to Salvation Army, and she says, we have no accountability. We cannot control them. Well, but they bring them here, so they need to bear some of the brunt of this accountability. I'm just sorry that's the way it is. I don't bring criminals down into the street or down into the city on purpose, but a lot of these communities or the charities do that, and it's affecting us all down there. All the people that are in businesses should be here today, but they're working and they couldn't be. I'm very lucky to be here. I just want to make sure that you hear the side from a business owner, not only the side from every one of the charities that we have here. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? No? Okay. All right. That concludes our study session, and we'll be back at 3 o'clock. This meeting is adjourned.